Yeah, I think we should begin too.
Okay, chalo. Good morning, everyone. I am Ariba Asanath Mausam, Senior Research Scholar at the Department of Political Science, University of Hyderabad. AIDS is back with its ninth e-lecture on another topic, Coolies in Indian Literature, Understanding Colonial History and Modern Slavery. We have received overwhelming response and we thank you all for joining us today. Your presence encourages us to organize more such interesting lectures and talks. Today is a very special day for us as we have our first Young Research Scholars talk. We at AIDS encourage PhD research scholars and young assistant professors to share their research findings on our platform. And today we flag off this endeavor with Aratrika Ganguly, who is joining us from the University of Calcutta. It might sound ignorant on my part, but when she first suggested the topic and I was making the poster, I had no clue that the term coolies included not just the railway station coolies, but also laborers that worked on plantation and coal mines. It was an interest. Yeah, I'm sure it will be an interesting lecture, and we will get to learn a lot from her today. This is our first lecture that I think that is can be properly situated in humanities. And though I have studied literature till my graduation, I hope you all ignore any hiccups I make during the event. I would like to request one of our executive members, also our Vice President, Zeba Tamkanat, to walk us through the inception of AIRS. Over to you, Zeba.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Ariva, for that succinct introduction. Let me just quickly introduce AIRS. Association of Indian Research Scholars, also known as AIRS, is the brainchild of Ariba Asanath, the president of this association. It was created to bring together like-minded, intellectually inclined, and enthusiastic research scholars of a generation, and to collectively increase our knowledge base while also interacting with the best minds in the world. To this end, we have garnered the support of some of the best in their field, including Professor Muhammad Mausam Ali, professor and former HOD, Department of Political Science, University of Hyderabad, Professor Zoya Hassan, Professor Emerita, Center for Political Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, Professor Alfredo Toro Hardy, retired Venezuelan diplomat, scholar, professor, and public intellectual, Dr. Aparna Devare, Assistant Professor at the University of Hyderabad, Professor Rajan Harshe, Professor of the Political Science and the former Vice Chancellor of Allahabad Central University, and many scholars from across the world, including Nuno Rodriguez, Director Quixote Global from Madrid, Spain, Paul Szymanski from Space Strategy Center, Carnegie Mellon University, New Mexico, USA. The aim of this association like AIRS, is to not only provide a platform for young scholars to connect with experts, but also to have intellectually stimulating and interactive sessions with them. In order to make this happen, we aim to host webinars, e-lectures, seminars, talks, book discussions, and distinguished lectures. In the future, we also intend to expand towards doing conferences, seminars, symposiums, and book discussion panels. Through these mediums, AIRS intends to promote a seamless and harmonious interaction and engagement between the social sciences and humanities communities in the country. It also aspires to bring together people to hold discussions, debates, and conversations on theory, research methodology, research ethics, research practices, and methods to expand the research community and to bring everyone within one ambit. The future of AIRS holds dynamic experiences. We intend to bring the Indian community closer to the international community, not only through lectures and seminars, but also through publications. AIRS intends to follow a focus on the most relevant issues in the world and the various pressing scenarios on the national and international scene. Following AIRS will help you stay on top of not only current affairs and get an in-depth analysis of burning topics, but it will also give you the opportunity to expand your knowledge base through the diversity of our events. We now also have publication opportunities with Millennium Journal of Humanities and Social Sciences. You can submit your papers to the official mail, which is aribamausam at airscholars.onmicrosoft.com. The mail will be in a chat box for your convenience. You can follow AIRS on Instagram, to Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, WhatsApp, Telegram. You can also follow us on our website, airs.org.in. I now call upon Ariba to continue the event. Thank you, Ariba.
Thanks a lot, Zeba, for that succinct introduction of AS. Now let me introduce our speaker today, who is a young achiever. Aratrika Ganguly is a PhD research scholar in the Department of Comparative Indian Language and Literature, University of Calcutta. She is currently delivering lectures as a seminar lecturer in 3 colleges under the University of Calcutta. Her research area for PhD is Coolie and migration and their literature. Her interest lies in the area of South Asia, Southeast Asia, Coolie literature, migration, women narrative, performance studies, and African literature. She completed her MPhil in comparative literature from Jadavpur University, Kolkata. She has also worked as UGC UPE2 Phase 2 Project Fellow at the Department of CILL, University of Calcutta. She participated in several national and international level workshops and seminars, and she has quite a few number of publications in peer-reviewed journals. Now I invite Aratrika Ganguly to take the floor. Over to you, Aratrika.
Thank you, Ariba. There is my network connection is showing that my network bandwidth is low. Please let me know if I am visible and audible.
Sure, sure. You are visible. You can continue. If there is a problem, I'll inform you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Ariba, and thank you, Iris, for providing me the opportunity to speak here on your platform. It has been an amazing journey, Ariba, since I met you, obviously virtually, but still, thank you for this friendship, and thank you,
Right.
Iris, once again. And good morning, everyone, and happy Diwali. And when you said like you once my poster you were doing that you didn't know what the coolies that that's what I'll be talking about actually how what coolies really were, how it slave laborers, how it the whole thing is related to colonialism and imperialism. So shall I start, Ariba?
Sure, please do.
Yeah, okay, thank you, and thanks to all the participants here. So the topic is coolies in Indian literature, as Ariba said, understanding colonial history and modern slavery. Now, to understand about coolies and indentured laborers, we have to go a bit back in time when slavery was abolished. So we have to go a bit back in time, a time where the non-white, the non-Caucasian people were tortured, you can say mercilessly by the white Caucasian men and women. Yes, I'm talking about the slave trade, slavery. I'll not delve deep into the details of slavery, but it ended in phases. This inhuman institution of slavery faded away gradually. During the late 18th century, Europe wanted to deal with the rest of the world, start trading with other parts of the world, and this need for economic markets for a growing population in Europe made them turn towards one continent with whom they always had a master slave binary relationship. I hope you can understand I'm talking about Africa. However, to deal with Africa in the mainstream global market, they needed to stop slavery. This is stated to be one of the reasons why slavery was abolished. According to this theory, the slave trade was stopped, or rather, no, can say abolished, as it had become an economic necessity, and we all know how economic benefits drives Europe. Not being biased, but it is true. In Europe, slavery was abolished in 1794, but the eminent French leader Bonaparte, Napoleon Bonaparte, he re-established that inhuman institution in France during 1802. However, the circumstances were changing for the colonial powers and slave revolts, the American civil wars. You can like see it depicted in various movies and text and etc. Ultimately, their European powers had to abolish slavery. The whole of 19th century saw the abolition of slavery by the European powers at various parts of the European colonies. However, the significant event was the abolition of slavery by the British during 1830s in France. And one man who actually in America, one man who really helped in abolishing of slavery was, we all know, Abraham Lincoln. And according to the IA Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, 1859 declaration relative to the universal abolition of the slave trade was the first international instrument to condemn slavery globally. In retrospect, the abolitionist movement began as an effort to stop the Atlantic slave trade and to free slaves in the colonies of European countries and in the United States. Many agreements dating from the early 19th century, both multilateral and bilateral, containing provisions prohibiting such practices in times of war and peace. It has been estimated that between 1815 to 1957, some 300 international agreements were implemented to suppress slavery. So the abolition of slavery should have been a very joyful event in the history of humanity, should have been a very proud humanity, but it was not. As this institution of slavery gave birth to another horrible institution, it was kind of a replace. That was indentured servitude. Basically, official abolition of slavery in around 1834 created indentured servitude. The name changed, but the philosophy continued in the form of the recruitment of indentured laborers. Servitude has existed from since I think from 17th century in North America. When the poor Europeans went to America with the hope of earning a proper wage and living a new life free from poverty and bondage. It was kind of a contract signed by a person in return for a passage to America. It was a barter system, but a different kind. People were also living for the Caribbean from Europe. It was a system where the laborers mostly entered the contract out of their own will. However, their lives are not always good after they entered the system, where they would work for some wealthy landowner. However, I will be talking more about indentured labor in the Indian context that started post the abolition of slavery throughout the world. In this context, I will love to quote one of my favorite authors and also a very well known research scholar and the author in the field of indentured labor. From his book Coolies of the Empire, I quote Ashutosh Sir's book lines. In 1834, the British government in India introduced what came to be known as the indentured system, through which Indian laborers could go overseas to work on the colonial sugar plantations on fixed term contracts from 1834 to 1920. The recruitment of Indians to work on the colonial plantations of various islands was organized through this system. The model of Indian indenture system was borrowed from a practice that originated in Europe. Just a second. Yeah. Is it okay now? I think there is some problem with my net.
Yeah, it is better now.
Okay. Yeah. So from 18, this model of Indian indenture system was borrowed from a practice that originated in Europe in the 13th century, but it became a common practice in 17th and 18th centuries. Under that system, labor was recruited for the planters by their agents to work for a certain period of time, usually 5 years, or at times it was maybe 7 years as well, during which the employer was legally obliged to provide fixed wages, medical attention, and other amenities for the laborers. After the period had elapsed, the laborer could either renew his or her term of employment or return to his or her native land. The Indian indenture system had largely the same general terms and conditions with only minor variations between the different colonies. The main feature of the Indian indenture system was that emigrants had to commit themselves to a fixed term of labor in advance by signing an agreement, popularly known as Girmit, which committed them to work for 5 years in their destination colony. A form of agreement was available where the preconditions of engagement were declared in English as well as in the regional languages such as Bengali, Hindi, Urdu, Malayalam, Kannada, and Telugu, etc. The agreement form clearly mentioned the kind of work to be done, hours of work and remuneration, and the availability of various other facilities such as accommodation, hospital, and rations, etc. Another technically attractive and significant provision of agreement was an optimal return passage at the immigrant's own expense after the end of the first 5 years, or a free return passage to India at the termination of a further 5 years of industrial residence in the colonies. The extent to which migrants were able to fully understand or planters were willing to genuinely uphold the terms of these agreements has been the subject of much debate at that time and since. I unquote. Yeah, it has been a long quote, I can understand. Thank you for bearing with me. But whatever Ashutosh Kumar is talking about, in reality, you know what happened? This official version of the agreement, actually, the word agreement was corrupted and the locals couldn't pronounce the word agreement. So they used the term girmit. The word agreement became girmit. In real life, so the situation was not that easy. It was very different. I mean, from history books, from the archives, from many colonial documents, like I've searched in many places in the National Archives, in the British Library in UK, and all I got was like facts. We can get facts of how many people migrated as indentured laborers, how many people died during the journey, how many lived, what happened. But in literature, the portrayal is very different. That we'll be talking more about. So coming back to it, this indentured servitude actually made the laborers bonded to contracts that were not followed dito by the colonial powers. And either way, for people coming from the places like Chotnagpur Plateau region, because mostly the laborers were recruited from the Chotnagpur Plateau region or from the villages of Punjab, Rajasthan, UP, Bengal, Bihar, Tamil Nadu, and various such places, but mostly from villages and remote places. So it was impossible for these people to understand the Girmit as it was unintelligible to many. Not so many facilities were available to the laborers. At times they were tortured, they were broken, and even some died due to inhuman travel or working or living conditions. Medical facilities, proper hygienic living quarters, a proper amount of food was not available to them. So, no, as we say, no, like it's a very popular thing we say at times that literature reflects life. And we can say all of this because this is what like the text on indentured laborers shows us. That takes like for the my PhD research work, I'm working on the internal migration only because this internal migration of indentured laborers and the external migration was very much related. So I will be talking more about not on history but on the literary text for this lecture. And to come back to indenture servitude, to say in plain words, in reality indentureship was a way to propagate capitalism. It was none other than a very refined way of substituting slavery for capitalism. Indentureship walked hand in hand, and the colonial powers made it look like the laborers were going to work for a few months to years based on legal contracts that will allow them good working conditions and enough wage to sustain themselves and their family. However, in most cases, what happened after coming to work in foreign land or in other parts of the country, they would discover how they have been fooled. Fooled by whom? The middlemen, the recruiting agents, the sardars, the arkatis, who are actually working under the colonial power. And the sardars or arkatis were mainly the plain people, the people from the plains, the towns, the cities. The imperial power would always take advantage of the people who not only suffered poverty but were illiterate as well. And the the irony is that the most sad part is that these people, mostly the middlemen, were known to them, some friend from their village, some relatives from the city, and these people had a full trust for the middlemen and many times just sold to the imperialists without their knowledge. Well, in the modern present day scenario, UNESCO recognizes August 23 as the International Day for Remembrance of the Slave Trade and Abolition to commemorate the tragedy of the slave trade in the memory of all peoples. On this day, the first statue of memorial slavery at the Suriname Ghat was unveiled in 2017. The Maibab Memorial Ghat along the river Hooghly in Kolkata and the Aprabhasi Ghat in Mauritius serves as a reminder of the forgotten people. The ghats, that is the river banks, become a symbolic space of migration of indentured servitude. Because Aprabhasi Ghat is the first ghat where the laborers from India went as indentured laborers to Mauritius. They first stepped down in this ghat in those symbolic 14 steps stairwell. The Ghat becomes a site of memory for the indentured laborers. It is a place where intersection of experiences of migration takes place. Aprabhasi Ghat was the first symbol outside of British India where the indentured laborers landed in 1834. And this was the start of what we can say in present day indentured servitude. The construction of Aprabhasi Ghat remain a testimony and the sole surviving example of this unique modern diaspora, the roots of which tell the story of some modern working systems like that of contractual laborer. Culturally, it speaks of the traditions that Indian men and women brought with them to this foreign land and embedded them here. The Aprabhasi Ghat is also UNESCO World Heritage Site now. And this very popular Mauritian scholar, Khal Torabuli, he is he himself was part of an Indian indenture system because his ancestors came from India via the indentured route. According to Khal saying, the Ghat can be a heraldic space for the humanism evolved in Mauritius since the indentured set foot on this island and can uphold the teachings of this encounter with exile and otherness, sharing its resulting coolitude with other spaces, bearing in mind that its symbolism is not to be entrapped in narrow visions, closing oneself on an atavistic identity. The foremost poetics of space of the Ghat is contained in the humanism of coolitude, which also encompasses the experience of vast migrational waves of Italians, Germans, Polish, of all those who fled the misery of the 18th and 19th centuries to settle in Canada, Australia, all those who set foot for a brighter future or from a past riddled with failures. The schoolitude doesn't only represent a restricted type of migration with an Indian tinge, it is verily a hymn to migratory labor in its fullest sense. It offers us a wider scope and space, enabling us to read history with its entanglement of experiences and mosaic imaginaries. It is with this symbolism that the Ghat, which cannot be a ghetto, while highlighting the indentured plights and promises, can uphold the coolitude of its space as its intrinsic poetics, defined as an open and vast vision of the world when migrations with a contract are more defined and more prevalent nowadays. I unquote. But both the Saprabhasi Ghat and the Maibhab Ghat is a symbolic space for memory and culture. I just mentioned the term Kulichud while referring to the eminent scholar Khal, so words on the Saprabhasi Ghat. This word was coined by Khal in 1992. This word has multiple layers of meanings. It indicates the history of the indentured laborers. By now, you can understand the indentured laborers were called coolies. So, it indicates the histories of the indentured laborers, that is, the coolies of various places that are interrelated. And this term wants to create a shared history, to create a large community that will include all coolies and their history. It is basically, you can say, a subcategory of thalassography, that is the study of sea, bay, gulfs, etc. In this context, we can also, compare it to Caesar's negritude of the 1920s. Coolitude tries to foster interaction among the descendants of migrants, that is the coolies, and make them a larger part of a community of people whose history as fate has been similar. Some were even Jahaji Bhai. Jahaji Bhai was a term used by the shipmates who are traveling together as in part of indentured labors. This term is very popular in not only in Khal's works, but we can also find this term in Amitabh Ghosh's Sea of Poppies, the Ibis trilogy. This term is also present there. The term coolitude actually empowers the descendants of the coolies in the countries where they are still treated as second-class citizens. Khal even himself said, I chose this word because the coolie was essentially one who replaced the slave in the plantocratic society. The word slavery always comes, when anyone talks about indentureship. Also, the internal migration within India from like the Chotnagpur Plateau region to various parts of various tea plantations of Assam, Duos, Darjeeling, to various coal mines of Jharkhand, Bihar, West Bengal, and the external migration from India to other colonies were a part of the whole coolie network indenture system. The British used to recruit laborers from one part of the country and send them to other parts, from the country to other countries, to British Guyana, Dutch Guyana. Uh,
Picture
Sorry, am I not audible?
No, you're audible.
Please continue. Please continue.
Okay. I thought I heard something. Okay. So yes, so the British and this system was not only followed by the British, but the Dutch, the French, and laborers were sent to Dutch Guyana, British Guyana, to the Caribbean, to the various countries of Africa like Natal, Transvaal, and to various Southeast Asian countries as well, to Fiji, to Mauritius, to Trinidad, and so many countries. Uh, no, the what happened? Both were allowed by the British not only to what to say, not only to gain control over the colonial the colonized people, but also whenever they used to send one coolie from suppose one part of India to another, or from one from India to the Caribbean, they will do something like the locals will not have any like if for some reason our coolie has been transported to suppose South Africa, and I'm a coolie. I went to South Africa as a part of the indentured laborer, but I will be discriminated with my South African brothers and sisters as well. So with the locals also, there will always be trouble. So in the plantations also the same thing happened. In India, the coal mines also the same things happen. With the locals, they're not allowed to mix up. They're not allowed to, what to say, go into marital alliances or be friends, to be acquaintances with the locals. And this will create problems because not only because the locals will get hostile towards the indentured laborers, but also the locals, the British, the colonial powers, not only the British, but the white, quote unquote, white colonial powers will create such a problem that the locals will not have any right over their own land, and neither the indentured laborers. So ultimately, everything goes back to the colonial powers. This was a very genuine problem, and that is how even today there are some songs that in the various parts of the African continent, in Mauritius, in Fiji, there are songs, there are cultural protests against the children, the grandchildren, the great great grandchildren, against the uh, families who have survived from the indenture system. Still now this problem goes on. Well, labor history tells us that docile bodies are always welcomed by imperial powers for cheap labor purpose. And this impetus was provided by the migrant workers who came from various parts of the country for internal migration to plantations or mines, and from other Asian and African countries to the colonies for external migration. The first coolies from India actually went as laborers to the various colonial sugar plantations. Later on, the influx of coolies increased as more and more people wanted to change their destinies and join the coolie trade. The movement of the indentured laborers was started from India to Mauritius or Trinidad in the sugar plantation area, and the same thing was happening within the country. But I will be like talking like I will like to stress more on the tea plantations and coal mines of the internal migration, and how this is represented in Bangla literature, because the whole Indian literature is a very multilingual pluricultural space. It has many bhashas and bolis, as Ganesh Devi says it. It's not possible to talk about so many literatures like in a single session, because there are Two Leaves and Bud by Mulkraj Anand. There are many various Nepalis and Nepali text like Ajarami Tacha, Lagan, and etc. There are Ghosh. There are so many. So I'll just consider some of the Bangla literature text. But among the text I'm talking stand out because this was released this year, and this is about external migration. The other text I'll be talking about on internal migrations to tea plantations, to the coal mines. But this text is about an indentured laborer, a girl who travels from India to Dutch Guyana. And this has been released this year. Its name is Full Moti. It's a novel by Krishnendu Mukhopadhyay. Well, as I said, this laborers for indentured servitude were called the coolies. Although the word, now let's talk a little bit before I delve into the text, a little bit about how the word coolie came into being, the racial context of the term, the background of the term. I mean, although the word coolie has multiple origins, but all are negative and it is a racial slur. Indentured has made many people lose their identities and existence in the sea of colonial trouble. Uh, the crossing the Blackwater, or as it was referred to as the Kala Pani, was not only a metaphorical term that meant crossing the seas will cause loss of identities of the coolies, but also it was a term that they feared the most. The people who followed Hinduism in a collective sense believed that crossing the ocean would cause them to lose their caste, and this fear was so embedded deep within the minds of the people that many isolated themselves from the rest of the world. Even the cellular Jelvinu of the Andaman Island, it was also termed as Kalapani as well, because the prison housed India's independence activities, and most prisoners came back after crossing the Bay of Bengal. They never came back actually. However, migration is the most natural phenomena, and it's true, none can stop it. Even though the migration of indentured laborers across the ocean happened due to the exploitation of the imperial power, but this thousands. Their loss of caste, but also on the hope that the future might eradicate poverty from their lives. Many even did not bother coming back home for the fear of losing their caste and social status in front of their families. Most were even not welcome back. Alive and came back well, they were not welcomed back by their family. Yet men and women intermarried among various castes and communities, and that made them more vulnerable. The caste conscious Indian people would not accept the laborers back to the native village. Many returnees would come back and see that their maybe homes were occupied by relatives, or the family priest would ostracize them from the village. The women suffered the most because many would be dumped by their husbands, whom they got married when they were indentured laborers. And after coming back, these men will dump them for fear of losing their caste. Many would be given wrong address of their husband and then left forever by their upper caste husbands. This forced diaspora created a new category called the coolies. Even the forced internal migration created the same category. In the case of internal migration, very few people actually came back because of the treacherous landscape. They were unable to escape the coal mines, they were unable to escape the tea plantations, or even if they will try to escape, they were, if found by the any British under the British officer, they will be almost beaten to death or raped in the most inhuman way possible. This word coolie was previously used in the 16th century by the Portuguese travelers who used the term to refer to workers in the port. By the later 17th century, this word had transferred into English, but it is probably coolie that meant wages for manual name of an Aboriginal tribe in Gujarat. In the multilingual, I quote Lees, according to her, in the multilingual port cities of Asia, words easily overlapped language barriers and gained a special place in many vocabularies. Whatever British arrived in Malay, the word was used by Europeans to describe Asian workers of few skills and low status. Historically, we know a very famous book came out few years ago by Gautra Bahadur, Coolie Woman, The Odyssey of Indenture. And according to Gautra, she also uses the term coolie. Why? Because from her point of view, coolie means someone who carries baggage. She's saying the baggage of the coolie really carries baggage, the baggage of colonialism on its back. It bears the burden of history. In general, coolie may for some meant unskilled laborers, cheap labor, and so much. And its association was with menial and derogatory jobs. Nevertheless, this same word gives them a distinct identity. And like using this word in today's academia and as well as non-academic literature makes their existence and identity more genuine. Calling this indentured laborers coolies makes us realize how they have been created as a product of the colonial power. But still now many have survived every odds, and the literary texts that will be analyzed will reveal their contribution towards society and actually they kept alive and well fed the economic sector of the colonial power. They were the ones behind the plantations and the mines and other economic powerhouses for the colonizers without any personal benefit. They are the, like for me, they are the real warriors. Moreover, another important fact was that though there were indigenous people present in some area, as I said, so the British used the coolies and made settler colonies on these places. Like I said, because to create a pressure on the indigenous people, okay, when my earrings are not liking this lecture, I guess it's called fall down. So the important fact was that there were indigenous people present in some areas, so the British used the coolies and made settler colonies on those places in order to create a pressure on the indigenous people so that they doesn't rebel against the colonizers. And this not having any right over the migrated lands, both by the coolies and by the indentured, by the laborers who were already, the people already present there. It made sure the British had a hold of those lands, the plantations and the mines all on their own. Coming back to the abolition of indentured servitude, I'll just add one point before talking about the text. that is about one Indian man who actually played a highly important role in the history of the Indian indentured workers. That is, we know very well know our very beloved Mahatma Gandhi ji. Not going into the details of his life in South Africa and his fighting as apartheid, but it will be injustice not to mention Gandhiji's name while talking about the Indian coolies in the context of not only South Africa but Mauritius and Fiji too, because he went there as well. So in the whole context of Indian indentured laborers, it will be very injustice. It will be injustice on my part to not mention Gandhiji at all. Uh, like from history, we know from 1860, Indians started going to Natal of South Africa as bonded laborers, that is the coolies. These coolies were involved in railway construction works, coal mines, and sugar plantations. Some Indians even started opening their own business in various parts of Southern Africa. They were supposed as threats by the colonial white administration. They were suppressed. And this suppression of Indians in Africa has been portrayed in literature as well. Like I can talk about, like I teach my students this text on Alien Soil. It's a short story by Sundara Ramaswamy. It also talks about the same kind of discrimination of the indentured laborers, the laborers they face in South Africa, used to face in South Africa. Coming back to the history, we know that Indians were even made to pay taxes even after their indentured period was over. They were not allowed to walk in the same pavement along with the whites, especially in the southern parts of Africa, or travel in the same train carriage. We know the famous train carriage incident, what happened to Gandhiji. And various other laws were imposed upon them so that they would go back to indenture, but not due to a home or establish a new life for themselves. Gandhiji protested against this inhuman form of laws that made the Indians record themselves with the white authorities and get treated as slaves. Gandhiji organized a mass meeting in 1906 where first his passive resistance campaign took off. He was jailed in 1907 for his protest against the laws that made the Indians register themselves. Gandhiji and his followers undertook years of struggle in Transvaal, and these movements had a positive effect all over the world. Not only in South Africa, but I mentioned his visit to Mauritius and Fiji also helped in achieving freedom for the indentured laborers, especially in those Southeast Asian countries. His role in the ending his passive resistance created furor among the Indian diaspora of these countries, and his role in the ending of the indenture system in the early 20th century can never be forgotten. The creation of the Anti-Indenture Emigration League was another major step towards the banishment of the system. However, the coolies inside India, when talk about internal migration, it did not really affect them because they were already
I guess she has network issues. Please bear with us. I think she'll join us back. Give
Yeah,
us some.
yeah, yeah. I'm very sorry, sir. I don't know what happened with my Wi-Fi.
No, no,
Not
no.
at all a problem. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
but
think even with your video off, you can continue because the lecture is so interesting. We would not like to miss anything out.
yeah, I think I will stop my video for some time because my network connection is it's a bit unstable.
Sure, sure, sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I will switch it on after some time. Thank you, Ariba.
My
So
pleasure.
yes, this yeah, what I was talking about this internal indentured system was not really affected by what Gandhiji did outside India. The coolies inside India did not really get any freedom when the indentured system was abolished by the British Empire officially in 1917, because even in the census of 1931, we can see patterns of high migration rate to the tea gardens of Assam from various parts of India. And you can say, no, obviously as coolies. The coolies were still at move. Even while outside India, the anti-indentured laws were really at force. Well, Indian literature, as I said, I cannot talk about everything, so I'll just talk about some of the Bangla text. First, let me start with the text Fulmoti by Krishnendu Mukhopadhyay. This novel revolves around Abel Vanderberg, a Portuguese guy who comes to India for a student exchange program and stays some days extra for finding his virtual princess he called Fulmoti Mai. As the novel comes to an end, we come to know that this Fulmoti Mai, this woman, was an indentured laborer. I cannot say woman because she was really a girl. Indentured laborer for some part of India, northern India, who saved the ancestors of Abel Marcus Vanderburg and Emily Vanderburg. She became the symbol of ultimate heroism and represented power of love and self-sacrifice. This young girl saved the young pregnant Emily along with her husband Marcus from Marcus's own uncle who was trying to kill them from power and wealth. Fulmoti Mai's Bhojpuri songs were sung by the family over generations. Abel learned such songs and about Fulmoti from his aunt who nearly worshipped Fulwa. And this aunt gave her the name, started calling her Mai, Fulwa Mai, Fulmoti Mai, that is mother out of respect. Fulmoti, the young widow teenage girl from a remote village of northern India, became the goddess of Vanderburg family not only because she took care of Emily and their unborn child, but because while Emily and Marcus were escaping Paramaribo in Dutch Guyana, they were attacked by Marcus's evil uncle, Hendrik Vanderburg, and this Fulmoti actually, cut a long story short, Fulmoti helped in this couple from escaping Paramaribo while killing the uncle Hendrik. There was some problem with properties and there was problem among the the indentured coolie owners, the plantation owners. There were very internal conflicts, and Fulmoti actually saved this couple from Hendrik, and in turn, it's very pathetic that she also died. Abel's worshipping of Fulmoti Mai represents another side of colonization. He worships Fulmoti if he's in trouble from getting a scold from his teacher at school, to various other situations in his life. Among his serious dreams are becoming one with his lover, narrating her the story of India and visiting India. For him, India was a symbol of Fulmoti Mai, the indentured laborer, a coolie. So, even in literature and in life, we can see that a country is symbolic, getting symbolic. A country is getting to know itself outside. Like India is known to Abel's family as the country of the coolies, the indentured laborers. It doesn't happen, not in life, not in literature. Also, at the same time, polyphonic qualities of the culture of the coolies were ignored by the colonizers. It is very much reflected in this novel because the pluricultural, multilingual cultural expressions were as heterogeneous as possible, and they were very much ignored by the colonial powers. In Fulmoti, the novel, Fulmoti belonged to a village from Bihar, British India, and the language was Bhojpuri. However, while Abel came to India and was searching for his Fulmoti Mai, he was constantly ignoring the diverse cultural forms of the country and was relating it with the identity of Bhojpuri and Bihari only. On one hand, his respect and affection for his virtual princess made him equate the whole of India with his very own imagination Fulmoti Mai, but on the other hand, it is very much a colonizer's arrogance. It is always a colonizer's arrogance. This novel, written in the form of Abel's diary, he is writing this on his tablet while traveling to Amsterdam from India. He's traveling back to his home. He's writing this so that he can properly narrate his Indian experience to his beloved while he reach his country.
Can you please mute yourselves, everybody?
Yeah, thank you. Well, in India, Abel met a sex worker, Mitali, and his lover herself was a sex worker in Amsterdam. And this, it's obvious from the narration that he wanted to bring on the lover and human from his beloved, who as well had to sell her body in return for food. This woman in his life are not very different from Fulmoti, who and her father similarly had to leave their village, their best friends, their known world in hope for feeding themselves. Hunger, the basic instinct of living beings, can make one commit actions and undertake events that can change them forever for better or for worse. For Fulmoti and Bapu, who lost their family in poverty, boarding the ship to Suriname as indentured laborer, aka coolies, were the last resort to save themselves from dying of death and hunger in India. However, little did they know that ultimately they will meet death in the island of Dutch Guyana. Also, in this novel, we can see that slavery was abolished And so the indentured servitude came into play, but still some African characters, people from Africa who had come to Dutch Guyana as slaves are still present in these novels. And on Alien Soil, I spoke about earlier, the Tamil short story by Sundar Ramaswamy, the same thing is happening. There's a conflict between the Indians living there and the Africans living there. So this divide and rule policy was intentionally played by the British government, the white government, the Dutch government, to keep a control, to keep a hold over these people. This novel, Full Moti, it defines the comprehensive history of how Suriname adapted the indentured labor system when bringing back slavery became impossible. At the beginning of the novel, many planters were against recruiting Indian coolies for the sugarcane plantations, but later they had to accept because of everything, the world politics that was going on. The Indian coolies like Fulmoti and other villagers from our village were given proper living space by by Abel's ancestor Marcus Vanderberg. Unlike in other plantations, Marcus's plantation had proper huts and living spaces. Marcus even wanted to educate Fulmoti and kind of care, like took care of her like his own daughter. But even the language barrier did not stop them from expressing affection. However, this was not the actual case in all the plantations. The people were like not given proper hygienic spaces, they were on a sanitation, not proper food. They had to work for a long time. They will start doing any kind of like take drugs or alcohol or anything to take their mind of the heavy load they had to work on. There is a line by Ashutosh Kumar, as I said earlier, his famous book Coolies of the Empire. Ashutosh said that coolies were given small rooms to live in. Each of them was 12 feet long and 8 feet wide. If a man had his wife with him, they were given this room. Otherwise, the three men or three women were lodged in a single room. The provisions that was provided by the state was insufficient for a coolie working 10 hours a day on the estate, and the woman had to face more hardships than men in the plantations. These lines are said by Ashutosh Kumar in the context of the plantations of Fiji, but nonetheless, the state was like it was like the same. The state was same everywhere. Fulmoti turned out to be like this in this novel. This it's a fiction, obviously, but because of her association with Marcus, she had a better living condition. But in rarely people, there are people like Marcus who treat a coolie girl like his own daughter. In that respect, Emily's father's plantation and Marcus's wife had much worse conditions where coolies were living in. And Emily's father's plantation was the real kind of indentured plantations that happened in reality. Well, the Indian Ocean is considered a space where the coolies reinvent themselves. It is a space where people change forever. The journey is the notion of change. The ships not only acted as a space of intermixing various caste, creed, and communities, but lifelong friendships are also formed. As I said, the Jahaji Bhai, many were sexually assaulted on the ships while many died while traveling. The ship was the first step towards the indentured servitude. It changed the destiny of the coolies forever. In the case of the external migration, it was the ships. In the case of the internal migration, it was the steamers, the boats, and so on. This journey used to be tedious, and many men and women and children would die and they were simply thrown off into the sea. The closed spaces, cramped quarters, no hygiene, sanitation, no food available would make traveling impossible for the coolies who were not used to traveling beyond their villages. Because these folks haven't traveled like not a single step outside their villages, and now they had to cross the harsh seas, the harsh weather. They had to stay in cramped quarters inside steamers, travel to Assam from people like Chotnagpur. They had such a arid conditions, dry weather in Chotnagpur, tropical climate of Assam. So this will cause havoc in their lives. They even face sexual abuse at the hands of the European officers on ship. One such ship is a historical fact that marked the arrival of indentured laborers in Dutch Guyana of Suriname was Lalla Rook in the year 1873. It landed in the port of Paramaribo with hundreds of coolies of Indian origin. In the novel Full Moti, the protagonist of the novel, Fulu, also came in the ship. The characters are fictional, but the journey aboard the Lalla Rook really happened. In the novel, Fulu along with came with her father Ramashish because obviously to escape burden of poverty and debt. They felt they were lucky to have been chosen as coolies, but their innocence failed them eventually. The reality hit them after they escaping Dopohari village was the primary aim of Ramashish, who after losing his wife and sons have gone into more debt. Fulu accompanied her father as she did not want to stay alone in her village. The coolies had no idea that they were being taken to a colonial country, and it was a different, not even British, it was Dutch. And this name, the moreover, Abel Vanderberg tells us that Dopori is a vague idea of a village. There may or may not be a village of that name. Many such names and identity markers of the coolies were lost as they were unable to communicate with the imperial power. Well, coming back to internal migration, there are several texts in Bangla that talks about migration to tea plantations and coal mines. And it is amazing how even today coolies of the colonial tea plantations are a dominant theme in Bangla literature. Because this novel I'm talking about, Alok Rekha, it's about the story of a tea garden in the modern Jalpaiguri district near Assam and West Bengal border. It was written by one of the most prolific writers in Bangla literature, Samaresh Mojumdar. In the novel form, it came out this year only, but last year it was realized in the Desh Potrika in 2019. It narrates the life inside a tea plantation and people who are dependent on it from the perspective of two people, a British planter and the Bengali Babu. And in like as a third person, it talks about the coolies from various parts of Bihar or Nepal. It is a picture of the reality of the plantations during the early years of its formation in Duos area. It is a novel where exile lives together with otherness. The first tea plantation, we know that it was set up in the Duos region of Bengal. The first tea plantation of Duos was set up in the region of Bengal in the year 1876. This novel starts few years after the first tea plantation of Ghazal Duba was set up by the British tea planters. Alok the Bengali Babu, and Iron Scott, the Scottish tea planter. The coolies in this novel were brought from various parts of Bihar by the Arkatis by conning them with the dreams of filling their stomach with food. The coolies came with the hope of earning some money and dreamed that one day when the tea plantation would produce tons of tea, then their job will become permanent and their lives would change. But this dream did not last. The novel started when the tea garden where Scott is the head manager was starting out tea plantations. Tea seeds were growing inside the nursery and the coolies were cutting the canal from where water will flow to generate electricity that will eventually run the marketplace. The story progresses with the starting of the tea factory and plantation of the sapling on the main fields. Nevertheless, this is not the main plot, and the main story is the story of the coolies and all those associated with them. This linear progression of the story reveals the development of the Duos tea plantation in the late 19th century. I will not talk about many instances because all the tea, whatever happened in the tea plantation, whatever is revealed in literature is very much similar, very much alike. But I will like to say some few points from this novel, like about how they were treated in a very revolting and horrible way possible. They were given living space in coolie lines, where the coolies used to say those lines of huts were known as coolie lines. And these huts were dilapidated in conditions, had no sanitation, had no hygiene, as you already know. And sometimes, even at times, they were not even unable to, as huts were unable to protect them from wild animals. In this novel, the clerk Hare Krishna and his daughter had to take refuge in Shivnath's home after their hut was attacked by wild elephants. And coming back to the coolies, this Clark Hare Krishna was another Bengali babus. And in the coolie plantations, there were hierarchies. First, the British managers, then the secondary assistant managers, then the Bengali babus, then there will be the Sikh or maybe from any another community, there will be some drivers or workers. And then at the end will be the coolies. And these male coolies were nothing but a small loincloth, whereas the woman was sari that will barely cover their starving body. They were given minimum amount of food, and that's why they had to hunt wild animals, snakes, and even bats, because that is very much reflected and obvious in the novel Alok Rekha. And hunger becomes a major character in the novel. That is, becomes a major character in every text that is related to indentured servitude. Hunger is itself a character. It drives the plot, because in this novel, it drives the plot as educated man like Shivnath would come searching for a job in a tea plantation, leaving his infant daughter with his family inside the untamed forest of Duars, whereas Hare Krishna would come with his young daughter in the unknown land for a job so that they can have a proper meal and a warm bed. And this hunger will make the coolies get recruited fooled by the middlemen and accept every torture, every pain. They are caned, or they were even caned by the white manager of the plantation. Not only used to cane or beat the coolies, but also to torture their women in the most horrendous manner imaginable to the civilized world. This is very important because it's very, I mean, it's like when I read about this, one feels like shouting from inside, because the white civilized man tortured for them the barbaric native woman in the most inhuman ways possible. The coolie body was a commodity for the patriarchal colonial structure. It was not only cheap labor, but a means to satisfy their general frustration while living in the wilderness of the plantations, devoid of most social engagements, and for many white men, devoid of sexual pleasure. In the novel, there have been many instances of coolie women dying due to the assistant managers raping them in most inhuman ways, bodies to tearing out their nipples from their body. It is not sexual pleasure that made this white men rape this coolie woman, but an assertion of patriarchal and racial attitudes. The body of the coolie woman carries the discourses of the indentured regime under the colonizers. This same happened for the external inner migration as well. For the coolies on the aboard the ships, on the sugar plantations, on the tobacco farms in various parts of the world, and for women inside what is that, coal mines. And this woman, like Spivak said, the subaltern, this coolie woman, not only the coolies were the lowest, like took the lowest rung in the hierarchy of the plantations of the coal mines, but the woman was the lowest of the lowest. However, these characters of Scott and Shivnath, who tries to bring about changes in the otherwise grim, realistic reality of the plantations, it brings some relief to the readers. And in every novel, even in Mulkadanan's Two Leaves and a Bird, the John De Lovre, the British doctor, he will be a bit of a source of relief. See, the writers whom I'm talking about, or I talked about, or I will be talking about, none of them were coolies themselves. None of them. They obviously felt sympathetic towards the cause. They wrote from that point of view, but none of them were coolies themselves. So when they are, for me personally, what I analyzed from this text, that any mention of characters like this, the sympathetic characters who will be doing something for the coolies and who in turn will get messed up within the British hierarchy and will be tortured and punished by the other British officers or the plantation managers maybe, or if the manager himself was a good person, then he will be given orders from the from Britain or Scotland that he should come back or he should not do such things and all. These people actually represent the author's voices, the helplessness. The characters, these helpless characters are the authors themselves, who are very much helpless. These writers who cannot help but only write about these coolies, who cannot help but bring out the voices of the marginalized, the subalterns in their literature, but do nothing more. Another important and very interesting thing is that these indentured laborers were not always viewed with respect by the indigenous population living around the tea plantation region. I'm talking mainly about the Adivasi people living around the tea estates. They used to mock the tea coolies. For them, the tea plant was a poison tree, as it has been reflected in this novel Alok Rekha. And working in the tea gardens would make their gods angry. They even looked on at the coolies for their association with the tea gardens. The coolie status came with bondage. And this bondage angered the locals. That is why British, the British initially for the coal mines, for both the tea plantations, they started hiring local laborers. But this bondage came with such a heavy price that they had to recruit people from a different region so that they can control the laborers. And these local people, they will know the every condition, I mean the treacherous landscape as well. So it was not possible for them to run away. And they would run away easily. And this led the colonizers to bring men and women from distant lands and bind them into these suffocating bonds of indenture. Also, there are other other two novels that in Bangla literature has very much reflected these conditions of tea plantations. And they are Bagichar Kuli by Labanya Kumar Choudhury and Chakuli Nattokahini by Jogindranath Chattopadhyay. They talk about, on the other hand, they talk about the British tea gardens of Assam, not Duars, but Assam. The first tea garden was established in the modern day state of Assam in the year 1837 in the town of Chabua. The Assam Tea Company was formed in 1839. This company is considered as the first tea grower company of India, and since its inception, Assam has not looked back. This Assam Tea Company was under the corrupt East Indian Company itself, and this made the former to oppress the people of the subcontinent. This oppression manifests itself even to this day, apparent in the downtrodden condition of the tea garden laborers. We can see even in news and in like news from the tea gardens come to us every day. One of the most important Bangla novels on tea gardens coolies is this Bagichar Kuli. It was written by Labanya Kumar Choudhury and was published in the year 1938. This novel is not only about the coolies but also the planter. It's about an Indian planter. It's very fascinating that it's an Indian planter. Deepak, the Indian planter, and the subsequent change in his mindset towards the coolies is one of the major attractions of this novel. This novel sets up the hierarchical chain in a different manner altogether. The draconian labor rules also apply here. Nevertheless, at the top planter. Change comes here almost with the gust of wind that shakes the garden from its core. The exploitation of labor is contested by Deepak's well-read and well-traveled friend Birinchi Rai. Birinchi's Marxian approach towards the labor force of the garden stirred everyone. The other Bangla novel I said, Jogindranath Chattopadhyay's Chakuli Nattokahini, it was published as back as 1901. Is based on a true story of a tea coolie's memoir. Well, according to the author Jogindranath, he met some tea coolie in one of his friends in a village in his friend's place. Girish Chandra, this tea coolie was his friend's servant, and this tea coolie narrated his experiences to the narrator, to the author, who wrote. I mean Jogindranath, and Jogindranath says that this is a true story. This is a memoir. This is not only a novel, but this is a memoir. And there is a frame-tale structure in this novel. And what happens, Girish Chandra talks about his own narrative of how he was lived as a tea coolie in Assam. And the author talks about Girish Chandra. And this frame-tale structure has further helped in bringing out the reality of the coolie's life by handing over the mouthpiece to the coolie, a rare occurrence in literature. This novel is both a novel and a memoir because the genres also overlap. The treacherous way the Sardas or the Arkathis used to recruit the coolies in the gardens is very much well known by now, as I said many times about this. So we'll just see how in these two novels it happened. In Chattopadhyay's Chakuli Nattokahini, Girish Chandra was lured into the tea plantations of Assam by his own relative. Girish Chandra himself was innocent at all, was not himself innocent at all, as he agreed to help the recruiting agent and Arkathi to help with recruiting coolie men and women from his own village. However, he did not know that he will himself be sold off as a coolie by the same relative. On the other hand, Chaudhury's novel Bagichar Kuli refers to the same trap that the poverty-stricken villagers of India faced that ultimately lured them into the plantations. Deepak's servant and the head of Kuli Kalyanpur Bhulua was born and bred in the tea garden, although his parents were brought from some remote village of Bihar by the Arkatis in a similar misleading manner. So the Arkat is actually, we cannot all blame the imperial colonial power for the Indian system. The Arkatis or the Sardas, this middlemen and the recruiting agents were very much similarly, I mean, they were equally responsible for this Indian system, for keeping alive this Indian system. Physical punishment of the coolies was a very commonplace occurrence inside the plantations. Cruelty reached its zenith inside the plantations and the treatment of the coolies by the managers or supervisors. The body of the coolie was treated as an object that can be thrashed or flogged anytime. The planters believed they were reinforcing discipline by hurling abusive languages or by beating the coolies. Chattopadhyay's protagonist Girish Chandra said how he got beaten by the senior officer while he was asking for money that order that his family had sent for him. The life of the coolies was dictated by the planters, managers, supervisors, etc. And the treatment bestowed upon them was more than what a prisoner bore during his jail time. In Chaudhuri's Bagichar Coolie, the young planter Deepak was touched for the first time when one coolie woman was beaten by a supervisor of the garden. And in these circumstances, he recalled transferred in the plantation in the past. How the original British owner Johnson kicked one pregnant woman and she died while giving birth to a stillborn baby, and how his own father broke the tooth of one coolie out of anger. These extreme forms of torture was common and everyday happenings among the tea plantations. The body of the coolie is separated from the mind of the coolie, and therefore such horrendous inflictions of pain could survive among the tea gardens. On another note, the mind of the coolie was never given any importance. His existence never taken into account. The reason was, both racial and hierarchical. Thus, disciplinary power, as Foucault says, is consciously or subconsciously practiced upon the body of the coolies to produce docile bodies that will maintain the hierarchical chain, and the coolies could be utilized to obtain maximum benefits for the planters. These docile bodies will further be easy to control and they can be useful to the colonial masters. The body becomes the site through where the regimes of power enter inside. The bodies of the coolies, that is a quote Foucault, now serves as an instrument or intermediary if one intervenes upon it to imprison it. Or to make it work, it is in order to deprive the individual of a liberty that is regarded both as a right and as a property. And there are very other forms of happening abuses happening, hurling upon women, about the divide and rule policy that the British used to play among the coolies, or how on the topic of women, on the topic of alcohol, there was abundant drinking culture. There are very forms of very elements found in these novels that I don't have much time to discuss about it. So I'll just talk about to a short story of on the coal, based on the coal mines. Coming to the coal mines, during the colonial period, there was a great influx of migrant laborers in the colliery areas of Western India. These migrants were mostly the Adivasis and Dalits and people from the suppressed castes, and they would migrate to reduce their oppression. But actually, what happened? It increased thousandfold when they would come to work for the collieries. The Adivasis were exploited by both the British as well as the Indian coal miners. They are paid very low wages of 5 to 7 rupees, and not even that. It was obviously cheap labor for the miners. The laborers even did not know they could protest, and the concept of collective awareness was missing among them. This was taken as a huge opportunity for the coal miners to exploit them even further. Coal mining was essentially a colonial institution, and the lack of proper infrastructure and economic development caused hindrance in the growth of development of coal mining, and the labor conditions were terrible. The short story Koila Kutia, why I will mention this short story, it is by Sholojananda Mukhopadhyay. It is the first short story, or you can say the first piece of Bangla literature that talks about the coal mine coolies. It is a landmark in the history of not only Bangla but also Indian literature. Set in colonial India, it reflects the reality of the laborer's life. The portrayal of this portrayal of the coolies in the genre of short stories, a genre that portrays realism and the Indian context. It was adapted from the West in its modern form, and portrays and reflects the Indian sensibilities in a way that leaves the reader question mode. And it is a genre that is very much in dialogue with the readers. Hence, rendering the lives of coal coolies in short stories in Bangla literature helps to reach out not only a wider audience of people, but it is also a targeting the intended audience for the short story, the educated urban intelligentsia. Even the contemporary times, the genre is a more and diverse reach, because in even now, there are many short stories in Bangla literature on the coal mines. The Ghanasham Chaudhury's, the whole text, Khadan Samagro, it's about coal mine areas, coal coolies, both in colonial and post-colonial India. Anish Dev's short story Bonbonia. It's on coal mines. So even now, people can relate to coal mine areas and still they're writing about the coal coolies. Shailajananda's famous and short story, first short story, this Koila Kuti, was initially published in the famous periodical Bosumati India 1922. Just a second, Ariba, how much time do I have?
I think you can take another 3 to 4 minutes.
Okay. Will it be okay if I take 5 minutes?
Yeah, sure, no problem.
Thank you so
It's
much.
very interesting. Please continue.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so this short story depicts the life. This was first published in the 1922 during the full regime, heightened time of the British regime. This immortal short story efficiently depicted the life struggles of the coal coolies in literature. In the history of Bangla literature, this story is a gem because it depicts the struggles of the coal coolies. It takes the readers to Bangla readers to the coal mine areas of Asansol, Raniganj, etc. This story is about a couple, Bilashi and Nanku. It is more about the lives of the coolies. This couple and the turmoil represent the troubles of the coolies in a whole. Actually, this story in microcosm reflects in macrocosm the whole concept of indentured labor of the coal mines. They work in the Jonaki colliery, and this short story is a result of Shailajananda's witnessing of the way the coolies lived, loved, and laughed. The small domestic quarrels between Nanku and Bilashi, their jealousy, their love for each other are romantically painted and beautifully painted against the harsh reality of the coal mines. They originally came from Jharia and was living in Raniganj, later shifted to Jonjonaki. This is a pattern of internal migration coolies of the coal mines. Moving from one coal mines to another, they would come far away from their roots. Their problem started when they moved to Jonjonaki. Nanko betrayed his wife Bilashi by running away with another coolie woman, Mainu. And he was drunk and he ran away with another woman. Bilashi had no choice but to live with another man, Ramona. She had no other choice because obviously a woman, multiple layers of oppression acts on her. And but when Bilashi got the news of Nanku's arrival in the colliery and his death inside one of the coal pits, it made she took Ramona with her by giving excuses. Her heart was craving for Nanku, and in hurry she jumped off the lift and fell on her husband, and he died instantly. He was taking his last breath, and Bilashi's guilt, regret, pain, love, and many more emotions enveloped Bilashi's heart, and she wanted to die along with her lover inside the dark coal pit. She started behaving crazily, and instead of coming up with her husband's body on the lift, she went around to Nanku's body from one side of the mine to the another. Then what she did she, like, there were loose coal chunks. She started taking out those chunks, and ultimately she and Nanku both were fell under those loose chunks and died. And Nanku also died due to one of those fatal accidents because even now there are popular songs like the Chashnala on the Chashnala incident and all. And I belong from a coal region. One of my ancestors was a coal mine owner, so I know these common accidents are very commonplace in the lives of the people who live in the collieries. Death inside the coal mines were common happenings, and nobody cared really about the death of the coolies. They were simply treated as collateral damage. There were no precautions or measures taken to ensure the safety of people working underground, and years of unplanned manning has created major faults inside the coal mines. But on the other hand, one some like it this short stories also reflects the oral tradition prevalent in the coolies areas, the coolie lines, the dhauras in the coal mines. We call it the dhauras. So the wonderful love songs or the songs on separation, betrayal, the songs on everyday life of the coolies, they are reflected in this literary text. I haven't mentioned it much, but no, it's not possible to mention so much. But this and the very sweet thing is that this even if we say okay, fine, these authors, these writers, coolies. Maybe Shailajananda or Ghanasham, people like Ghanasham, they have lived with the coolies. They visited the coolies, but they are not coolies themselves. But the songs, the oral songs from oral tradition that are taken directly and put it into the text reveals the direct nature of the what the coolies felt. So we cannot all say that the texts are not authentic at all. Well, it's almost time, so thank you for bearing with me. So while concluding, I want all of us to understand that please, that slavery is not dead. The terms and so on, the basic concept is somewhat statistics. Then according to the International Labour Organization, the ILO, there are around 40 million people who are under modern slavery. Yes, like in forced marriage, in forced prostitution, forced labor in the private sector, and much more. Let us take some lessons from this inhuman concept of indentured laborers, and like understand, like to stop any form of slavery we witness, or at least do our bit not to exploit labor. Starting, it can start from our domestic help, from our drivers, or anyone, or any help for that matter. And well, it's cliche, but this COVID-19 situation has really shown us the problems of migration and labor. We all know what was happening in India, what happened in India during the lockdown period, during the quarantine period. I hope the laborers who died during this pandemic find a bit of peace and let us help the others who are facing problems in this situation. Like, of course, we all cannot do heroic stuff like Sonu Sood or someone, but we can do some bit. I hope this talk on the coolies will help us look at any laborers from below. It is time we speak from below. It is time we understand them from the below. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aratrika, for that
Thank you,
enlightenment.
Ariba. Thank you
We
so
have
much.
learned so much from you today on coolies and modern slavery within the colonial Indian context. Let me congratulate you on how well the talk was organized. And I would like to add that on my trip to Mauritius, at a restaurant, the proprietor called a waiter of Indian origin to wish us when he found that we are also from India. And I was told that his ancestors were from India. And even though his name sounded Indian, the only word he knew was Namaste. You know, so this is my relation to that. And while visiting their museums, especially the sugarcane plantation, the photos and the processes that were used seemed so primitive and inhuman. But if I'd heard this lecture before going, I think I would have made it a point to search for some coolie narrative or photos in the museum. I
Oh, that
have
would
this
have been
idea,
amazing.
and I would have, I think I missed out on this opportunity. Hopefully next time.
Yeah, hopefully. I hope I can also visit someday. I have
I
to
hope the
visit
same. I think it would be great if we visit together.
Yeah, that will be great, amazing. Yes.
Yeah. So there are a few questions and some observations by our participants. Some
Sure.
people, participants have congratulated you on your efforts to read this and understand it from such a fresh perspective. And there are some people who want to ask questions. The first question is by Suparna Mondal. She wants to first congratulate you on a wonderful presentation, and then she asks us if she's curious to know if the coolie wrote any memoirs themselves, because you mentioned that not one of them has been written by. So do you have any examples where the coolies themselves wrote their memoirs?
Okay, I'll just switch off my camera. My network is really creating a problem.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, sure.
Yeah, thank you, Suparna, for this question. Actually, even I am searching for that. My research is in a very advanced, like in a very early stage now. So even I haven't found any memoirs now. It's very quite interesting that I haven't found any memoirs till now. And whatever I have found is the oral traditions, the songs, the in the Bangla say the choras, all those stuffs, but not the
Written accounts.
written account exactly.
Okay, okay, okay. I hope that answers your question, Suparna. The next question is by Kavita. She wants to know if you think modern slavery is something evolved that has evolved out of neoliberalism, and how can you contextualize coolies in 1 second. I think that she has posted it again. How do you relate coolie with colonial modernity? Hello, can you hear me, Aratrika? I think her internet is acting up. So while we wait for her, if anybody has anything to add on this enlightening topic, please raise your hand and I'll give you an opportunity to ask your question or present your observations. Aratrika? I guess there is some internet connection issues here. I request any one of you to please come forward and give us your observations and insights, and even your questions you can ask, I guess, so that we have some interaction going on while she joins us back. Dr. Satyanarayan Kanakala, thank you so much for your wishes and encouragement for what we are working on towards in AIDS. Thank you for appreciating our vision, efforts, and objectives.
I don't think she might be able to join us, Ariba. We could. It doesn't look like she'll be able to join us at this point.
Okay, let me make a call to her, and if she's unable to join, I think.
Yeah, that would be good.
No, she messaged me that she's trying to come. So I will give her 2-3 minutes.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah. If I would like to know if any of our participants is also working on a similar theme on migration, coolie, or Indian colonialism, and even modern slavery, we would be very happy to hear you also on some of your research findings, if that is possible. Because I can see that we have around 53 participants. If any one of you is working on a similar theme or would like to make an observation, you're please welcome to join us. Please switch on your video and audio and share your insights or research findings. Fortunately for us, I think her network worked well till she finished talking. So we are lucky that we were able to listen to the whole presentation, before which her internet, suddenly said, "That's enough, I'm leaving." So I hope she joined. I think she's joining us. Hi, Aratrika. Can you hear me? I think she just joined.
Yeah.
The...
Hi. I'm very
Hi.
sorry, participants. Like, I don't know what's happening. My Wi-Fi
No,
doesn't generally, it's not that this unstable.
no,
Like,
no
it's
problem.
Diwali,
It
it's in a mood of fun.
no, it is celebrating Diwali. It
Yeah,
is.
I guess so.
So yeah, the question was, how do you think modern slavery is something that has modern slavery evolved from out of neoliberalism?
See, I don't have I haven't studied much about neoliberalism, but what I've studied, the coolies, the concept of the coolies, I haven't found, according to the theory, you can say, but I haven't found any connection till now about the connection between neoliberalism and how the indentured laborers came into being
Okay,
within the
and how?
context of the indentured laborers.
Okay, thank you. And how do you relate coolie with colonial modernity? Is what she wants to know.
Well, does she mean the modern, like the quote unquote, the neo colonial period?
I think so.
Well, the coolies, is the official indenture system still in place? No, it isn't. But whatever you see in the tea plantations, the coal mines, or in people places like Natal, places like Fiji and Mauritius, as I said, like slavery, I shouldn't say a term, maybe slavery is a heavy term, but it is indeed. As we also say cyber coolies to people working in the Silicon Valleys. We say these terms. So indentured servitude is not there in the sense of indentured servitude, but it is still present. It is still present because people, when you go to a tea plantation, you can see the languages. There are very subtle examples. So there's a Mauritian languages used in the tea plantations. It mixed with the Mauritius tribes and the people coming from the Chotnagpur Plateau region, the local language. In even in the especially in the tea gardens of Duors, there is no single language. Still in Darjeeling, we find Nepali language is being used. In the coal mines areas, like as I know, all my family belongs, like they have worked in the coal mines over the years. My various family members, all related to the coal mines. We belong from a coal mine area. The language they use, like some will, there's a mixture of Hindi, Bangla, the Chotnagpur Plateau Adivasi languages, the different dialects. So language is very different. So colonialism is still there. I just spoke about one aspect. But in Mauritius and Fiji, in South Africa, as I said, anti-Indian sentiments, anti-indenture sentiments are still present. In places like the tea plantations in the coal mines, we have seen that some people really have a very, the locals, still now some locals have a very anti-indenture, no, sentiments.
Okay, okay. Thank you. The next question is by KK. I don't know if it's a he or a she, but the person wants to know, would you comment on other genres other than novel and short stories in which coolie life was accounted for in Bangla, such as pamphlets, plays, songs? If you can comment on that.
Yeah, pamphlets, plays and songs. Songs, there are many. The many songs are there. Like even I cannot sing them. My mother can, my aunts can. They can sing the Tushu Bhadu songs, and they are totally about Morod Kano Gelo, Chashnala. The Chashnala is a different thing. Chashnala is a very famous song about Chashnala. You can Google it. And there are other songs like Morod Kano Gelo Ete, and I don't exactly remember, my parents and everyone, they knew so much about this. They can, even my grandmother can sing some songs. I'm talking about the coal mines. And
Yes,
yes,
yes.
in the hilly regions of Bengal, in Assam also, there in songs, there are pamphlets, pamphlets, some are present in the archives. Yes, Suparna is right. Cholmini Assam Dabu is a classic example. And how could I miss that? Thank you, Suparna. It's a classic example of the indentured laborers, Tolmini Asham Jabo. And other songs, I don't remember. There are many songs, many songs actually. There are pamphlets, some pamphlets I have like found in the British Library. There are archives you can after a whole lot of research, you can find some pamphlets. And another
Okay.
genre, what he or she said,
Plays.
plays, I haven't found any till now, but I think in Nepali there are some. I haven't not like just, I just have completed the Bangla bit, not exactly meant the Nepali bit.
Okay. All the best with that endeavor.
Yeah, thank you, Ariba.
Ram Sevak Thakur wants to know if you can share your views on migration in modern times, which can be seen as an overturn of Western domination. If we can see migration in modern times as overturning Western domination.
Can you repeat this?
Yeah, I'm also very unsure of what he wants to know because the question is quite confusing. Please share your views on how migration in modern times can overturn Western domination. Western domination in what sense? I did not really understand this. So I think we'll skip this. So the next question is,
But actually, but I don't know if we can ever skip Western domination. That's the main thing.
yes,
We live in a neo-colonial, quote unquote, post-colonial society, and whatever
yes.
is happening, there is an influx from the global south to the global north. Migration is still going on, so we don't know.
Yeah, I think people are still migrating to Western countries, and I don't know how we can overturn
As students, at
by
Indian
going to their
workers, at
countries.
workers, as students,
Yeah,
and every point.
yeah, it will. It is quite a difficult thing. Possible in near future.
Yeah,
Okay, now
so
the next question. There, someone wants to know if there is a particular codification of laws that made their condition worse. If there any laws which made the police life miserable. I mean,
there were several. It's a good question. There were several laws. One, just a second. I don't, God, I don't remember the exact year of the law.
mhm. That's not a problem. You can share what the law was about.
It was for the indentured laborers only. It actually, I mean, these laws are mostly enacted in the late 19th century, and mostly these laws would like what happened. These laws were very much, you can say, against the coolies. These laws are very much. Yeah. Now come to sorry, the 1863, the first Labor War Act. Yes, it was to regulate the transport of native laborers emigrating to Assam Valley as well as the recruitment through RKTs, these licensed recruiters.
Okay.
Labor Act of 1863. Oh my God, it was horrendous. Then there's this Amendment Act of 1870. The Sazdari system of recruitment was recognized. The Sazdari system was recognized by the British colonial power. It was it was very horrible. I mean, the Sazdari system was what made the. I mean, it's something that not the indenture was bought because was born out of the colonial powers, but this laws made sure that Indians just stayed in place, and this recruitment was only going through by the Sardars or the Arkatis. That
Okay.
people will not just come free of choice or something, but will be fooled by these people.
Okay. Okay.
These were draconian labor laws, actually.
Yes. Very inhuman. Someone wants to know the timeline of this whole. They want to know when this whole thing started and when did it get worse in history. So they would like to know a timeline for when the conditions were the worst for the coolies.
It started around, as I said, 1833, 1834. The exactly Indian context. Indian just started like this coolies context. It started around that, 1830s. It got worse in the late 1880s, 60s, 70s. Actually, it was worse from the very beginning itself. It was
Okay.
much worse during the early 20th century. It
Okay.
was abolishing a bit during the late not the late, but the early, as Gandhiji did everything, 1917 and all. At the time, outside India, things were getting abolished, but inside India, things were still same. After independence, actually, things got a bit easy, not easy, bit easy.
Okay. Bit easy. Okay. Thank you for that. Could you suggest few books on how to look at and expand the knowledge on these subjects? People would like to know a few books that could help
Yeah,
them.
like fiction or non-fiction or
I guess non-fiction.
yeah. You can look at this moving India moving by Chinmay Tumbe. This is a good chapter on indentured laborers. You can look at Ashutosh Kumar's Coolies of the Empire. There is Gautra Bahadur's Coolie Woman. There are God. And but I will obviously suggest please read Amitabh Ghosh's Sea of Poppies. It's an excellent example. And these two are very seminal works. And Two Leaves and a Bird by Mulkraj Anand. And then there are very
Okay.
text and plus whole subaltern studies set has some or other chapters. They have some things on the, I mean, coolie and indentured laborers. And there is some good papers on, I found it on the internet, but they're excellent papers. One is by Nitin Verma. It's on, I think, the Assam indentured laborers. And another, keep on forgetting the name. It's also on the Hill Coolies. It's an excellent paper. Also on the indentured laborers, you can check a book on go by the eminent Bengali writer Gautam Bodro. It's written in English, but it's an excellent book. And there are many other books on codifications and all. But exactly The text don't mention, I mean, there is not a single text I have found till date that mentions both internal and external migration together in a single book.
Okay.
This is like separate text.
I think you can be the author of a text that would include both in future.
Oh my God, that will be a
Yeah,
dream.
because you identified the problem, and I think once you start working on it, many people will be interested and get to work.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe I just hope someday I can do it.
Yeah. So someone wants to know, how do you relate caste of these coolies in the situation of colonialism? Did the British focus on caste or caste? I mean, while finding these laborers, does the question of caste come in?
Very important. Actually, I am like one of my chapter on my PhD work. I'll be focusing on this caste, creed, community, religion stuff, and everything. Caste was very important because they took people from the lower caste, the suppressed caste, the Dalits, the tribals, the shouldn't say the word
Adivasi.
tribal, Adivasis,
Mhm.
various Adivasis, the indigenous communities. Caste was very important because this fear of caste. No, it's not that upper caste people didn't go.
Mm.
Actually, in reality, a recent study has shown that many women from upper caste used to go
Mm.
voluntarily. You know why? Because either they are widows, tortured by their brother-in-laws, or tried to
Okay.
forcefully enter into sati or anything, like happens in Sea of Poppies. And it was a very commonplace thing in India, northern India.
Yes.
And also, maybe a girl who got impregnated by someone who
Mm-hmm.
maybe who was violated by anyone. She wanted to live that treacherous life. Coolie Woman, Gotcha Bahadur's book is kind of it's based on that.
Okay. Thank you. That is very insightful. And like you mentioned, gender. Somebody asked a question on gender, how gender plays out in this situation, and is there any studies that show that this aspect only, how the women
Yeah,
coolies?
that book I told about, Gotcha Bahadur's Coolie Woman, that is exactly deals with gender.
Okay.
That's a classic. I mean, it's a very gripping book. You can take a look at it. And there is
Yeah,
another
sure.
book.
Mm.
Actually, I found it quite recently. I was searching on Amazon. I was like forgot the name. I think it said my added to my cart also.
Okay.
But this, in every book, even in Sea of Poppies also, there will be some bit about gender. But if you want to focus
Yeah.
only on gender, then Coolie Woman is the best book, I think.
Okay. Thank you. And the last question is more of an observation. When we say colonialism, we don't necessarily mean the British, right? So, how do we look upon these other European countries that were holding small areas in India but were contributing to the atrocious situation? For example, the Portuguese or the French. And so, in other words, how do we complicate the idea of colonialism? Because we constantly think colonizers are just English, but they are not. And how did this complicate the idea of colonialism and the coolies in India? So they want to know, stress on the fact that not just Britishers, but also Portuguese and French were contributing to this.
Yeah. Portuguese, French, this Dutch people, and everyone is contributing so much to. Because the novel I mentioned in Fulmoti, they went to Dutch Guyana, not to British Guyana or any to other British colonizing country. But the 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 I don't say it's kind of because it's kind of funny to say. I don't know, not funny is that's not the appropriate word, but it's satire that these people, for them, they saw the British in India. For them, white men were the same. Be it the Dutch, be it the French, be
Yeah,
it the British. For them, that doesn't matter. These people
yeah,
are
even
white, these people are different from us. So for them, we are going to the colonizer's land. Doesn't matter who they are, that it's a totally different type of colonization. And yes, the
yes,
indentured laborers were exploited by everyone, not just the British. They are exploited, but the British exploited the most because they had the most number of colonies.
colonies in the
Generally
world.
speaking, they had the most number of colonies. They were ruling India at that time, so obviously they could exploit them more. But the others also followed suit, not just the British.
Yeah, colonial past will never shed its, even
Yeah,
now, listen to people talk in common languages also, you hear the word Gora in reference to anybody. Matlab, it is not whether this from America or
exactly. Yeah,
anybody who's white is a Gora for the mass population.
mass population is Gora.
Like, Are you from England? Anything is referred to as London. London, or
London, yeah.
they
I
don't
mean,
think of
oh my
anything else. So
God,
you
that's
directly.
so
So
much
yeah,
power over the world still now.
yes, word. Yes,
Till
exactly.
now. I'm not saying the Dutch people or the French did something good by recruiting indentured laborers, but they also have played an important part in this whole system.
Yeah, Mauritius is a good example. They were also
It's
people
a good
French
example.
colony,
China
and
is a good example. Suriname is a good
yes,
example.
China is a very good example.
China. Yeah, indentured laborers were recruited from China as well to the Sri Lankan
Yes, yes.
colonies and all. Many were
There are
recruited
a lot
from
of
China.
Chinese. In Africa, there are a lot of Chinese
Yeah,
labor.
Africa, there were a lot of Chinese. It's
Chinese.
such a
Yeah,
global network. That is, it's very astonishing.
exactly.
Global network. Such an earlier form of globalization.
Yes, it was a precursor
Yeah,
to.
exactly.
So yeah, thank you so much, Aratrika, for joining us today and for this enlightening lecture. It was a pleasure having you and listening to you. And now I would like to request Asta Benzani, research scholar at Banaras Hindu University, to please give the vote of thanks. Over to you, Asta.
Hello, am I audible, Ariba?
Yes, yes, you are. Please continue.
Yeah. I would like to thank Ms. Aratrika Ganguly for such a wonderful and interesting presentation on coolies in Indian literature. I would also like to thank all the participants for joining us today. The participation has helped us become an enlivening experience. I would like to extend my thanks to the President of AIRS, Ms. Ariba Muazzam, for her tireless efforts which have made this event possible. I would like to thank Narendra Jarwal, Farisuddin Ali Muazzam, Zeba Muazzam, Rajesh Kumar, and Evangeline Nonklo for their help with making this lecture a success. Thank you. Over to you, Ariba.
Thank you, Asta. Please fill the feedback form which has been provided in the chat box. And thank you once again to all of you who have joined us. And I hope to see all of you at our next lecture on November 19th, which is our first international collaboration. We have organized a webinar with Cabell's International on predatory journals and how, as Indian scholars, we can avoid them. I hope to see all of you there. Au revoir and have a wonderful Sunday ahead. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ariba. Thank you, Ears. I'm honored to be a part of this forum. Thank you
It was a pleasure having you. Thank you
for
so much.
bearing
Time out.
with me. Happy Sunday, everyone.
Happy Sunday. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.